Hey everybody, my name is Kenset Kunum, and I just want to welcome you and thank you so much for joining us today. I am president and founder of North Star Technology Group, and today I am super pleased to be co-presenting with my high school classmate, friend, and colleague, Steve Golden of Fractionally. I hope I pronounced that right, Steve. If that's not how it's
Perfect.
pronounced, you need to change it because that is a super clever name. Um,
Um,
so for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about something that is going on in every organization, not almost every organization right now. That weird collision between AI adoption and the ability to manage or govern it, right? And we joke about it's more of the lack thereof. Um, We'll take time at the end for questions. Use the Q&A part of the Zoom to put your questions in there. If any are relevant at the moment, I might interrupt Steve, but we'll probably save those to the end. But feel free to jot your notes down and let's get this thing going. Steve, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here. And I'm surprising you with the picture. As Ken said, we've known each other for a while, as you can tell from this blurry picture from the 1980s. Um, all kidding and all fun aside, I'm really excited to be here and have a chance to talk with everybody about.
But
Uh,
Steve, I know you want to get into this so much, right? But we cannot leave this picture just so left untalked about,
oh,
right?
go
So
for it. Go
what is
for it, man.
going, where are we here? Why am I wearing sunglasses? Well, why are you weirdly looking at the camera?
I'm
And
I'm
look,
not.
people are wearing band uniforms in this, and then there's
You know,
Joe Leckie wearing a Batman shirt.
You know what? I have the background on that. I'm not going to credit my source for this
Oh no.
picture. The blurriness should give away the fact that it's a little bit of a recapture. But this was from a high school yearbook photo day opportunity, and from what I recall, if we all behaved well enough wearing those marching band uniforms, we got to take one relatively relaxed picture. And I think this is that. So
That is the relaxed version. I
and
see.
I'm looking through that cast of characters, and some of those people are going to be upset that they're blurred out because they are thinking that they're pretty happy with themselves in this picture, and some of those people are going to be saying, "Hey, thank you for making sure you shared something that's relatively blurry." So,
Yes, yeah, that's fair. Well, Steve,
but
we do go back a long ways. I'm happy we're able to reconnect. I know you're doing a lot of super cool stuff. Just to talk a little bit about us, most of you on this call maybe know, I've been in technology for a number of years. I started North Star 25 years ago. Last year, actually, we celebrated our 25th anniversary, or was it this year? Yeah, last year. Um, and we focus primarily on compliance regulated industries, utilizing a framework that I like to call Protect to Propel. Focus on cybersecurity foundations allows your AI and automations to run crazy. We work with organizations of all sizes, and our goal, of course, is to protect people, profits, and reputations. And a big part of that is helping our customers navigate their AI journeys safely, right? And what Steve is doing at Fractionally aligns perfectly with that message and that vision. And I'm super excited for you, Steve, to give us some wisdom. So again, thank you.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so why don't I kick it off and get to the kind of the meat of the presentation? And thanks for the introduction, Ken. As he said, I'm Steve from Fractionally. I founded Fractionally last year, and the sole purpose in founding my own information governance consultancy was to take a 30-year career in a variety of industries, a variety of organization sizes, and just a whole lot of different environments, and say, hey, how can I package this up and turn it into something that can benefit other organizations more at scale? So I thought consulting, but more than anything, I'm really looking to help people on that fractional basis where I can help you at the pace you need, right? Information governance, records management, those skills and talents are amazing, but not always something you need in a full-time dedicated resource. So that's the gap I'm trying to address and fill. And I have to admit, a year in, I'm having a lot of fun doing it. It's great conversations, great opportunities, and just great interaction at the meat and potatoes level of what information governance needs to be in today's organizations and to meet today's challenges. So,
And Steve, before you go in, I want to reemphasize the fractional portion of this, right? So I actually had a conference call yesterday. I'm going to be doing a board or a panel on AI for a large legal group in Carlsbad, California, here in June. And we're meeting, and it was a doctor, right, of medical practice. It's going to be talking about workman's compensation and AI. It's kind of a weird crossroads. But we had a doctor on this call, Steve, and we had a lawyer who's going to be the kind of the what do you call it, the moderator of the panel. And one of the big things that came up is how complex a lot of people think, right? Governance is, especially in context with AI for with some of these smaller organizations, right? And they specifically called out how they can't afford to have full-time people doing this job. So, similar to North Star, right, in our approach, we feel that organizations need CISOs, they need CIOs, they need chief AI officers, right? But they may not be able to afford that. Doesn't mean that they don't need some form of that function. And so, approaching it from a fractional perspective is the way to go, and it supports what North Star does as a mission. And I could see your service being hugely necessary for a large chunk of mainly underserved clients. So again, thanks, Steve, for taking that on, and hopefully people will get a lot out of this.
yeah, I'm absolutely happy. And I see the same thing. So, thank you for that.
I would hope so, Steve. No, I'm not
Uh,
seeing any of that.
right. So, yeah, so we're going to talk about that AI explosion that everybody's been talking about and focusing on. And then I'm going to get into some information governance basics, talk about some compliance risks, and more than anything, and I can't say it more plainly enough, practical next steps. Right. I will never tell you that I think information governance is rocket science. So we're going to keep it very practical and very straightforward. Um, but let's just dive in a little bit. So what is this explosion? I'm referring to, and there's a lot of stats and metrics and reports and so on and so forth out there. I'm going to focus on this one, and I think this should be on everybody's radar. 56% of employees are already using AI tools for work. Okay, and this is coming from Full View in November, so recent. At the same time, only 26% of organizations have policies governing that use. Let that sink in for a minute. In most organizations, more than half your team is using AI tools that have not been vetted by IT. They may not comply with your data privacy obligations. They may be sending people may be sending your organizational data to third-party servers right now. This isn't a future problem, it's a present one. The gap between adoption and governance is what we're calling the AI governance crisis, and it's growing. Ken, you want to add anything there, or shall we
Yeah, I
keep
mean,
plugging
I
along?
I need to second that, right? The AI adoption is far outpacing governance, right? In managing the risk around using it, right? And that's not and that's not unexpected, right? We live in an age now where IT doesn't have direct control over things. There used to be a time, right, where CIOs and their networking team said, "Hey, here you go. Here's the technology you get, and here's what you use," right? Because
Yep.
there was really no easy way for the staff to get it. Now you can freely, people, departments, employees can freely go out and use a lot of these tools. So yeah, I 100%. And I think even that 56% has to be a low number. And I know you say that November of 2025 is recent, but I bet you anything that number is dramatically changed even today.
Probably has. Probably has. And Ken's all in on cybersecurity, cyber technology. I've got a little bit of an ISO 27001 background myself, so
Just a little bit, huh, Steve? Yeah, you
just a
just
little bit.
sprinkle that in
So
there, yeah.
it's just a little bit. So when when we're talking about this AI use and so on and so forth, I'm not focusing in this presentation at all on the malicious stuff. I'm
Yeah.
talking about good people trying to do a good
Trying to do the
job
right
and
thing.
do their
Yeah.
job better, right? So um, the reality, there's chaos and clutter, right? What does this actually look like on the ground? Here's some examples. It's a team member feeding client data into a free AI writing tool just to draft a proposal. They're probably not focusing on where that data goes when it's into a free tool and what might be happening. Your finance team using AI to summarize contracts that contain sensitive commercial terms. If not protected, if not governed appropriately, that's going outside your organization. HR running resumes through an AI screening tool if there isn't a data retention policy in place can be a big issue. Some of my career stops have had me working with large global organizations. So, that one specifically stands out in my mind because we've had a US based headquartered company where we're managing applications in a talent application management program, and all of a sudden we've got Europeans standing there saying, "Hey, we've got people applying in Belgium. How are we managing the retention of their resumes?" And that gets to be pretty granular. Was it something we sought, or did they give it to us freely? It makes a difference in how long the loss is you have to retain those things. And then when we add a layer of chaos and clutter to, like an AI screening tool looking for certain attributes in the resume, again, we're what are we doing with this information? Where are we capturing it? None of this is malicious. People are genuinely trying to work smarter and faster. But every one of these scenarios represents a real risk. It's a risk to your client's data. It's a risk to your compliance standing. It's a risk to your organization. And often it's invisible until something goes wrong. So, what is information governance? Again, I said this is going to be very practical, and I don't think it's rocket science. It's one of those terms that can sound abstract, so I'm going to make it concrete. At its core, information governance is about ensuring the right information gets to the right people at the right time with the right controls around it. That's it. It isn't a technology. It's not a compliance checkbox. It's a discipline, right? It's about knowing what information you have, knowing where it lives, who can access it, how long you need to keep it, and what happens when it's no longer needed. So when AI enters this picture, every one of those questions takes on a little bit different complexity, and it gets more consequential to get wrong. Um, I will tell kind of a brief side story. I love the game of football, and I use it as an analogy for a lot of things I talk about for one main reason, and that is because I think that's one particular sport that has something for everybody. I'm a big guy. My son loved football. He's not a big guy. Some people are fast, some people are slow, some people block, some people tackle and run, right? Excuse me. So when my son was in high school, we brought in a coach. He was actually a parent to a set of twins on the team, but he had also played in the NFL for 7 years. So this guy comes in at the ninth grade level, and in ninth grade football, first year of high school, some of these kids have never put on a football helmet in their lives, and others have played as they were growing up. And this coach is there talking about how to block on the offensive line, a position he played in Washington and Pittsburgh NFL, teams. And as a volunteer, a dad slash coach, when the kids were younger, we've said, hey, this is you got to block your guy, and if we're running to the right, block your guy to the left, and so on and so forth. When this coach came in, it was like, okay, this is the difference between a straight block, a 30-degree block, a 45-degree block, and he's showing them all these different moves. that's what AI does to the chaos and the consequences of getting information governance wrong. It brings it to an additional spectrum. It's almost like 4D information management, in my opinion. And I don't know if you.
I think you just coined a new phrase. I'm going to use that one, 4D information management. People were like, what? I was like, well, 3D is so 2026, right?
There you go. Absolutely. I'm going to run right to the trademark office right after this.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. It adds a whole different level of complexity at the same time opportunity. And and again, I've had so many conversations with customers and prospects about this, right? Because there's I think a little bit of a misunderstanding that okay, well, if we're providing some level of governance or cybersecurity management with some controls with data as it is, as it was 5 years ago, that, well, what difference does it make if we have AIs? It's the same data, isn't it, Ken? And so being able to frame this completely different because of what AI does regarding access and interpretation, and again, all of the amazing opportunities, but still at the same time, right, it introduces a whole set of risk that we never even considered 5 years ago. So compliance, governance, all need to evolve with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And your governance is going to rest on really four pillars, and they remain unchanged with AI. It's policy, establishing clear guidelines for managing information securely. Um, I'm not going to do a poll in this particular meeting, but just kind of a thought process in everybody's mind. How many people, how many of your organizations have a records policy? Simply defining what a record is and is not. There's a phrase, an acronym we use called ROT, ROT, redundant, obsolete, and trivial information. And it's a great point of leverage in your organization. A lot of people are storing data that aren't records. There's no legal requirement. There's no compliant or regulatory requirement to keep it. There's frankly no business requirement to keep the list of who brought what to the department potluck lunch 6 months ago.
Yeah.
It's redundant. It's obsolete and trivial information. R is redundant, by the way. Um, the next pillar is people, engaging stakeholders to foster a culture of compliance. Right, we got to have the right people involved. It's going to involve the head of IT. It's going to involve the head of legal. Those are probably more commonplace. HR is always a great group to have involved in anything that's going to impact the entire organization. Right, we need the right stakeholders. We're going to need the key people from lines of business as well. Absolutely. On the process side, structured workflows for data handling and governance. I don't want to pretend that a governance policy is going to be something that's going to be so nuanced that every person in your entire organization is going to think about this on a daily basis, right? That isn't the point. More so, the point is, do we have workflows for how data is handled, how it's classified, whether it's public or private information, right? How it's stored and how it's disposed of. And that's always a big thing. Governance doesn't depend on individuals making the right call every time. It should have a process and policy to back it up. And then technology, right? These are the tools that automate and enforce governance at scale. So Microsoft Purview, one example where governance can be leveraged greatly in that tool to help manage help manage your data. But it also includes the rest of those ISO 27001 17 domains, access controls, data classification, how we're auditing it. If anybody in the group has had to do a SOC 2 Type 2 report and done some compliance auditing or certification, at that level, information governance is heavily invested in about half those domains as well. Think of it like this. Weakness in any one of these pillars as part of your approach to governance is going to undermine the rest of them as well. So how does AI disrupt governance? Well, AI really creates a lot of new information flows that most government frameworks weren't designed to handle, right? When an employee uses an AI tool, data moves, it's often going to a third-party cloud. Um, that cloud can be trained on your data. I can't hesitate enough to make sure people let that sink in. And Ken's got all the tools and capabilities to help you make sure that doesn't happen in your organization. But absolutely, if not governed correctly, your inputs to an AI tool will help train their learning model and their generative process. Um, and it can be retained in ways that violate your retention policies. Um, AI also governs or also generates new information assets, right? It creates summaries, it's creating outputs, it's creating decisions. And this content has value, but it carries risks and it needs to be governed just like any other organizational record. Um, this meeting right here, there's nuanced laws in California about recording meetings or taking meeting transcripts. And those laws differ from other states, right? So there's interesting ways the tools like Zoom, the tool we're using now, manages that, but nonetheless, it has to be taken into account.
Yeah, local uh, laws and regulations are, I think, a big area that customers that I've talked to they miss, right? They consider themselves, well, I don't fall under compliance regulations. Like we have a lot of maybe non-traditional compliance customers that don't fall into healthcare or DoD contracting or even finance. They're like, well, nothing really applies to me. But if you go down to that state level, it's a completely different game. It's like, so there's things that organizations need to start understanding when it comes to locality, even. And a couple of things that you brought up, Steve, that kind of resonated with me. So the presentation that I did out in Anaheim, when I'm sorry we weren't able to connect. I wish we could have. Um, but the presentation that I did in Anaheim, I told the story about this automated transcription AI tool, right? That listened to um, patient encounters, right? Real-time transcription, made decisions. You mentioned the word making decisions for you, right? Which is a big difference between how data was managed before and how data can be managed today, but made decisions. But this tool was sending um, these conversations, so patient names, diagnosis, these encounters to a third party quality assurance partner that lived in another country. And so this information was on the business associates agreement for healthcare. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? But it was buried in page 31 of this document, right? So things have changed, right? AI now is disrupting what used to be a simple even BAA process, right? The agreements that you guys have signed with your EHR vendors back in 2019 don't apply today at all, right? The language doesn't even exist in those documents. AI is completely disrupting governance, right, from the ground up.
Couldn't agree more. It's absolutely the case. So what does that leave you with? It's a
It
compliance
leads us to
minefield.
a minefield, Steve.
There you go, right? HIPAA, FTC, GDPR, CCPA, alphabet soup, right? But most of these frameworks were written before the generative AI existed at scale.
I
So
joke that HIPAA was written when the cloud was still a weather event, Steve. Am I right?
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think you're right. Um, the regulators they're actively working to extend and interpret them in the context of AI, but at the same time, it's a minefield. We don't know what we don't know, frankly. Um, and organizations, especially here in the U.S., organizations in regulated industries, healthcare, financial services, they face particular exposure, but no sector is immune. Absolutely. And organizations that are going to navigate this well aren't the ones that are reacting after a breach or an audit finding. They're the ones building their governance foundations now, and hopefully, doing it while there's still time to do it thoughtfully. I think. Um, there are some common governance mistakes that I would like to advise on. These are patterns I think Ken and you and I both see these pretty consistently across organizations of all sizes. I'm going to start with no written AI policy. Employees are making individual judgment calls with no guidance. Ungoverned cloud tools are adopted at the department level without IT review. Data classification schemes that haven't been updated in years, or maybe even never existed, are contributing to that being a problem. I'll call out one one in particular example that I came across in an industry I was in, and this one is dated about 5, maybe 6, 7 years ago. So I think it's still very relevant, but at the same time, it's very specific. Um, and what's interesting about it is this example doesn't involve AI, but the tool has AI today. So imagine if the problem wasn't or hasn't been capped as I'm telling the story, how much more chaotic and more complex it's become because the tools added process and improvements to its tool set using AI. So what was happening is an organization had individuals that, in good standing trying to just get through their day and do their jobs, but they were involved in the making of television and movies. And so they were dealing with a lot of files. They would often work with outside vendors, right? Editors and others that manipulate film and video for a living. So these files are, as we all know, very large, right? Moving gigabits at a time versus megabits at a time. And certain tools, and sometimes here's what I promised. Again, sometimes Microsoft native suite application tools just don't get the job done when you're moving something that's 4.5 gigabytes, right? And you got to move it effectively. So they were going to some outside tools, and one of them was Dropbox. And it worked. It got them through their day. They were able to share data with outsiders, so on and so forth. But the problem is their application, their method of acquiring Dropbox was to go to a website, plunk down their card for $15 a month. The next thing you know, they've got this large cloud repository. And it wasn't sanctioned by IT. IT wasn't aware of it. Well, as things moved on, the awareness that happened was, hey, everybody's talking about Dropbox, and that's not one of our applications. What's going on here? So a little study was done, and they were finding out tens of thousands of dollars on a quarterly basis was being spent on Dropbox subscriptions. And they were being spent on purchase cards. They were being spent on corporate Amex through, the travel and entertainment reimbursement expense process, just a whole number of individual Dropbox accounts. What's the solution to that? Well, I mean, shut it down, but then you're causing a business problem and a disruption there that's not making anyone happy. But did Dropbox have an enterprise licensing process? Did they have a way to safeguard the data? They did, right? It was just a matter of the right level of engagement. Did they have a way to say, hey, if your domain is this, you can't engage in a personal account or a single business account. You have to go through the enterprise. Absolutely. They had all the tools and components to be able to do that. And even better, Joe at Acme, when he left, he didn't get to take all those, gigabits, half a terabyte of, pre-release film content with them. So, very, like I said, very real example in one of the companies that I encountered while I was in the entertainment industry for 10 years. And seemingly it was just a bunch of people saying, hey, how do I get data to an editor so they can work on it right now so they can get something back before the end of the day when the directors and producers are still here and they want to see a cut. Pretty
Yeah,
straightforward.
Steve, you talk about some stuff, we've been fighting, shadow IT, for a number of years. I talked about that earlier, how, at one point, I call it era one, where IT provided that technology. And now, we're on era two, and now era three with AI, and staff and people and business leaders are bringing their own tech. And of course, that creates the shadow IT, which can be expensive. It can be dangerous, right? You mentioned Dropbox. And now, of course, now we're seeing shadow AI because people are introducing their AI tools. And some of them are conscious decisions, right? They may be doing it incorrectly, and again, no ill intent, but they're doing it intentionally, right? They're getting ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, right? And they're inputting stuff. But there's a whole other area of shadow AI that is coming from your software vendors, right? That you already know and trust, EHR vendors, practice management, case management applications, right? That are shipping AI tools as part of the products that you purchase, and you aren't even conceding to that, right? You're not consenting to that, right? So even if you are doing this the best you possibly can, right? You're trying to govern this the best you can. The road is steep, right? Because even your vendors want to push their AI tools on you, and so being able to to gather that inventory, right, to understand what you have, to build policy around is critical. I always tell people like you can't govern what you don't know you have. So um,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked the problem through, right? It exists. I think
I
everybody's
I
convinced.
think everybody gets it, Steve. It's a problem.
We've talked about what governance is. How do we govern correctly? How do we take those four pillars and make them work throughout the organization? Again, I told everybody at the beginning, this isn't rocket science, and I'm never going to try and tell somebody that it is. But I boiled it down to four steps, right? First is assess the current AI tools and their governance status, right? I don't think you need a large team or a seven-figure budget to start making progress in these areas. Take an honest inventory of what AI tools are in use right now across your organization. You can't govern what you don't know about, right?
Yeah,
So
and I like this step. I feel Steve is like foundation step number one. Like you can't go on. I don't feel, and you're gonna maybe tell me otherwise. To even step two until you finish step one, you can't govern what you don't know you have. And for our heavily compliance regulated customers, that are on this call, that assessment part of it. So you gather what tools you have. The assessment is where the rubber meets the road, right? Understand what AI is doing, what models it's using, what information it touches for my healthcare customers. Is it interacting with any PHI? Is it making decisions? Agentically, right? Like really, really gather that. And for us too, I like to categorize that assessment, that inventory into some buckets of risk, because I believe that clinical AI risk is different than administrative AI risk, which is different than infrastructure AI risk, right? Clinical AI risk, if you are healthcare, can mean patient safety issues, right? Infrastructure, okay, well, that may be your email or your networking, which, has some impact, right? But really, really, really take some time on this step one.
absolutely, absolutely, and I think risk is a key word in that. Ken, I couldn't emphasize that enough. So thank you for bringing it up. Right? It's measuring that risk and using that equation. What's what how much can it cost in terms of all the risk components, and then what's the likelihood? Multiply those two together and really focus on what is the true risk in something, if something goes wrong here. Um, Continuing from that inventory, step two, just defining clear policies for data usage and compliance. Even a simple one-page AI acceptable use policy is better than nothing. And I can't say that more earnestly. Any acceptable use policy would be better than nothing. It sets expectations. It gives your team something to refer to. It gives IT something to hold in their hand when they're discussing how part of the organization is using an AI tool that they've never heard of before, right? From there, it's training your people, it's sharing the policies, but more importantly, sharing and explaining why the policies are what they are. Giving people context about what that why is I think a big part of how you can make governance within your organization actually work. We've talked just a little real nuanced example here. We've talked about shadow IT and shadow AI applications, and we stress that if you're working with AI tools that are sanctioned, there's probably some governance around what you're feeding into the tool and so on and so forth. I've found a website. I rather like it. It's a good tool. It's called Prompt Cowboy. It helps you take the prompt you're going to put into your generative AI tool and make it a better prompt, make it a more functional and efficient prompt. Great. So
Yeah.
some of you are probably sensing I like to talk. So take a paragraph and turn it into two sentences with 8 words each that give a clear AI instruction. Wonderful tool. But if people are going to Prompt Cowboy on their own and then going to your sanctioned AI um, tool and putting in a prompt, have they circumvented this governance process that we're talking about here? And are they still sharing through the Prompt Cowboy website information that shouldn't be shared? right? The last step, regularly review and update governance frameworks and practices. It wasn't by accident that my stat earlier was from November, and probably also not by accident that Ken immediately thought, hey, November. That's half a lifespan ago in some of this AI technology work, right? We have to
It
regularly
is in my
review and
world, Steve. Like November.
absolutely,
Didn't even remember.
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, do you have to review policies on a quarterly basis? No, no one's going to do that. There isn't enough. The juice is not worth the squeeze, so to speak, at that level. But annually, be a good idea to review those policies on an annual basis.
Yeah, I mean, all of this stuff is not a one and done thing, right? It needs, our last step under governance framework is operate, right? It's not, okay, we're done, hard stop. It's you run this thing, like
Yep.
you go through the process, you evaluate, right? You make improvements and I joke, right? Steve did a great job of simplifying this down to four steps, four pillars. But historically, and I talk a lot about IT reputation and how we've kind of evolved over the years and how a lot of organizations view technology and the people that manage it and secure it. But essentially compliance and governance, can't you agree, Steve? Like we've sort of been what I call the department of no, right? Like, no, you can't do that. No, that's not a good idea. No, not now's not the right time, right? And so
Yes.
I think, right, like you start implementing these steps, you develop a simple governance cycle, a process, you preload it, right? Like a lot of this work that Steve's talking about, you do up front. Now, obviously, the operations of it as you add tools or tools change, you're continuing to modify this, right? But if you can build this framework, right? Where the time it takes, right, for people to get approvals for things that are going to create innovation or make their business lives better. If you could build the framework to make that process faster than it is for those people to bypass the process, right? Because let's face it, right? If it takes longer to go through the governance process to approve something than it does for somebody to use a workaround or to go around the system. What are they going to do? They're going to pick the workaround 10 out of
Right.
10 times, right? So
Yep.
I love this, Steve, right? Simplification. Now of course you get into these steps. It's work, right? No doubt about it. It's like this doesn't just create itself, right? But I think you're starting to put some clarity around, hey, like we can do this, we can structure this, we can make this a simple, repeatable process and turn that department of no to being the fastest yes, right, in your organization. That's my goal, right, to help organizations better govern their AI, their cyber, and their technology.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Ken, you're going to allow me to shamelessly plug myself here, but that's exactly why I'm thinking of the information governance challenge as a fractional one, right?
Mhm.
Pop in, give the pointed advice that I need, pop back out and let the organization do the things that it's supposed to be do. So I'm not gonna talk anymore about fractional, instead and just summarize what we've given today and reiterate some of our key takeaways, and then we can get to some questions. So with that, first, the three things I want you to walk away with is, first off, AI governance is urgent, right? The gap between how fast organizations are adopting AI and how slowly governance is keeping up is narrowing on its own. It's not narrowing on its own, it's widening, right? So this is an urgent need. Secondly, I think information governance is the foundation. Without it, there's no security tool, compliance framework, AI policy that's going to hold. You need the underlying structure before the tools can do their jobs, right? And third, you don't have to solve this alone. Just practical, affordable paths forward, regardless of your organization's size or budget. And with that, I'll pop up the question slide and give you all an opportunity to figure out how to reach out to us and continue the conversation. And Ken, if you want to uh, kick off the questions,
Yeah.
we've
Yeah. So
collected
if
any.
anybody has any questions, please pop them in the Q&A. And as people do that, I just want to give people an opportunity to reach out to Steve and myself. I want to there's always a purpose, right, for the content that we supply on the boardroom. And this is an important topic, and it's one that, like we're just seeing more and more need of. And so, as my customers, as we start to work together, there'll be opportunities for us to loop in Steve, for his expertise. Many of you guys know, like we don't necessarily fill every position, right? But we procure the tools, the skills, right, the people to be able to fill some of these things, and Steve will be part of that moving forward. But yeah, please hit the QR codes, reach out, connect with us, connect with Steve, and let me check to see if you got any questions. Um, Steve, is there I think a pillar three, you mentioned training and education, right? So obviously you need to understand what you have, you need to build policy around that, your permission, structure around that, and then you talk about training. Is there a training platform that you recommend? Obviously, you're talking in general with the specific AI tools that a particular organization is using, to make sure that they are using their sanction tools and they're using it safely. But do you have any, I don't know, like people are always asking, like, how do I get trained on AI and all this stuff too? And I know that that may be out of scope here, but what do you use, or what are you recommending your customers use to get up to speed and educate themselves with stuff?
Yeah, no, great question. I haven't found a particular platform or avenue that
Hoping you would say something else, Steve, because
no magic, but here's the magic. I will say, I'm pretty invested in the information governance community, right? And I'll do speaking opportunities like this, but also industry associations, certifying bodies, that do designations in the organ in your field, and so on and so forth. And every one of those groups that I'm a part of, whether it's meetings or newsletter organizations, or those that have annual conferences and so on and so forth, they're all drilling down very specifically on how does AI impact information governance officers and organizations. For example, how does AI impact records management? How does AI impact application of retention requirements? What can you do with AI to more easily follow your records retention schedule? Right. So I'd say, specific to each member of the audience's organization in their industry is really lean into what others in your industry are saying. From a background perspective, I've like I said, a 30-year career in this stuff. I've done some consulting in the past, but also worked for long stretches with large financial institutions, insurance, wealth management, FINRA, SEC regulated stuff. I've been in the healthcare industry for about 5 years. That's what caused me to move to California. I worked for the largest producer of oxygen in the world. For those in the industry, you
do
might.
you work for the Earth?
Well,
I was
half of
gonna
you
give
thought
you I
half
was
of you
gonna give
thought
you a
they
little
might be
grace.
earthbound at the time, right?
I was gonna
And
give
then
you
I
a little brief, Steve, too, and you said that you worked in the entertainment industry. I was gonna say, yeah, Steve used to be a dancer, yeah, in his 20s, and then he cleaned up his life. But I
you,
love,
you
I
know
think,
for 10 years I said Spider-Man was my boss, and and
yeah.
and you
So
never know what happens when someone says that to you, because I'd have little kids looking at me like, Spider-Man.
yeah,
So
so tell everybody. So you work for Sony Pictures, correct?
yes,
And you were responsible for what, Steve? There.
I was the director of information governance, so I
Yeah.
was responsible for information governance on a global basis for the organization.
So yeah, global basis, right, for Sony Pictures regarding governance of information, right? So Steve has a background. I do want to add a little bit onto the training stuff, right? So, from my perspective, you have two different paths for training. You have one path is, um, how do I learn the tools in a more general sense, right? So if we use Microsoft Copilot in our organization, how do I understand and get up to speed on the mechanics of that? Or if you have, other AI models, ChatGPT or Claude, all the the dozens of others, so that, like that very, very specific use case, right? Chat, simple, right? Like we've talked about the Drive prompting framework. Steve uses Prompt Cowboy, right? Essentially, we use an acronym to help people get better prompts, garbage in, garbage out, fixing some of that problem. But it's, some of the other capabilities, right? Some of the agent-based stuff. Claude has their co-work and Perplexity has their computer, and we've got Claude Code and all these things. There are tools right out there. One of the organizations, and I'm trying my best, right, to develop a partnership with this guy named Austin Armstrong. And there's also another guy by the name of Jonathan Mass. These guys are big, big, big AI influencers. Um, Austin has a tool, a service called AI Hacks. Um, and again, this is just talking about understanding the tools and the use cases. I would never advocate for this, in context of your businesses, right? So, for example, there was a time where Austin was on a Perplexity computer kick. Great tool, but you still have to deal with your governance around your data still with this, right? So, like, you don't just throw these tools together, but that's a good resource. And Jonathan Mast has a huge community too where he provides that. But that's one path. The other path is, okay, I'm at an organization, or I work at an organization, or I'm a leader at an organization, and we have AI that's gone through the governance process already, right? The just say yes governance process that I like to call ours. And we've got the approvals, we've got the inventory, we've got the data mappings. How do we then train the staff on best use of that tool, right? Like that's a whole other different conversation. And so that stuff, I think there's a lot of options for generic, how do I use AI tools? The stuff that's unique to your organization, almost needs to be part of your learning and development. And I know some of our customers are large enough to have learning and development teams. Many don't, right? So maybe that's a need that we need to fill, Steve.
Very much could be.
Yeah. Couple other questions here. Many employees, probably, I don't think that is true. I think definitely would be a better word. Use AI on personal devices. How can we regulate any company info going out on non-company devices? Steve, I'll let you take a stab at that first because that sounds really scary.
Great. I'm trying to think. Every place I've worked, by policy, it's against the company rules
Yeah.
to take company information and put it on outside technology. Um, I think as far as actual technical controls, like there's the opportunities to control data from leaving the organization is,
Yeah.
to some extent endless, and it's there. Like I said, and I'll keep the analogy really short because I don't want to shortchange the other questions, but when I said Spider-Man was my boss for 10 years, right? Imagine something devaluing more quickly than knowing the plot of the Spider-Man movie without having to go to the theater and buy a ticket, right? So I'll tell you the short story. When did I learn there were three Spider-Man in the last full featured film? As an insider, as someone walking the studio lot every single day, I'll tell you when I learned. I learned it 6 hours before the rest of you in a theater on the lot with 500 people there and the aisles lined with security guards watching for anybody touching the phone. And everybody in the room was an employee. So we all had our jobs at stake if we squealed about the plot line of that movie. So, I mean, there's a variety of ways to govern
Yeah,
information. And if
technical
it's
controls.
really important, you'll have to build the technology to do it. But more
Yeah.
than anything else, I think you have to have a policy and make it relatable. This is why we can't do this. This is why we don't want you to forward your emails to your home computer. Buy them a laptop and let them take the laptop with them
Yeah.
and make sure it's on a VPN and all that kind of stuff, the technical side.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I'll just add to that. Number one, you need to use your Spider-Man story. And you're probably gonna get in trouble by Sony for doing this, but if I were you, that should be your lead-in, that should be your branding. Like that is amazing. We should have started with that story. That's a like that. The next one we do these, Steve, we're gonna start with your boss is Spider-Man, and
Okay.
everybody will be hooked on that because that's a great way. That's a perfect analogy of successful controls, right? Policy that works, training, right? That is effective and it accomplished the goal, right? Nobody knew you of anybody should have known. You did. It's awesome. But yeah, so for sure, technical controls are important. We talk about concepts of DLP, data loss prevention, right? So being able to classify comes down to inventory, classification, and assessment of your stuff, right? No, you can't govern what you don't know. And so if there's things that are important to keep private and safe, you need to know about it. You need to understand how it works, how the data flows from one place to the next, and build controls around that, both in policy, in training, and technical for monitoring and enforcement of that. Um, but Steve, seriously, Spider, like that's your story now. Um,
You got it.
the last question that I have right now, unless there's more, is does inputting edited or generic type verbiage on AI instead of specific company info still go against governance? Does inputting edited? So I think what the question is if dedact, redact, whatever the phrase is, you know, um, make it more anonymous.
Yep.
You put it in there. Does that break, in your mind, break data governance policy typically?
No, I don't think that breaks data governance policy at all. In fact, I think that's the marriage between data governance policy and IT security controls, right? Anonymizing data, pseudonyms, things like that, replacing important information with with placeholders is perfectly fine in my opinion. In fact, I think in certain cases that's probably the recommended avenue, right? So you can still get the result out of the AI tool that you're looking for. If anybody in the audience is in sales, they're probably sitting there saying, "I keep it all generic anyway because I want to reuse to the greatest extent possible the same thing." And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think that's not lazy. That's ingenious to say, "Hey, I got 3 documents here. I'm going to pitch to 3 different organizations." And I'm going to start with something that's probably 60%, generic because it applies across the board. And then I'm going to spend all of my time and energy crafting that last 40% to make it absolutely relevant to you and
Mm,
not waste your time with other things that are fluff and so on and so forth. So, um, I guess the lasting image I have on that question, Ken, is if you think about people that are dealing with really sensitive information that we all have credit card numbers, bank numbers, social security numbers, right? We're hoping on the other end when someone says, "Tell me the last 4 digits of your social security number in order to proceed with this conversation," that when you do that, they're looking at a screen on their end where they're typing in those last 4 digits, and that's the only part of the social security number they see as well, right? Because I'm going to give a shot at this word, pseudonymized
yeah.
the input on that end.
Yeah. So yeah, and again, 100% agree. This conference call that I had yesterday in preparation for this panel on AI I'm going to be participating in June. Um, we talked a lot about this because again, it's a healthcare focus. Um, Workman's compensation. So there's legal, there's clinical reporting that has to happen. A lot of the stuff is all of it, in fact, is in California. So there's a lot more regulations and conversations around that. But one of the guys was talking about how there's only so many AI vendors right now that cater to the small organization to sign a business associates agreement, a BAA, right? To be able to freely share unredacted health information, right? So, I think Microsoft has an opportunity through their compliance manager, but other companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, Perplexity, they have a minimum size organization where they'll do that for, right? So, you need to make sure you understand those rules when it comes to sharing sensitive information in the AI tools that you're using, and in particular, I'm using healthcare as an example, right? But if we're protecting healthcare, we're protecting everything. You talk about financial records, credit cards, and social security numbers, right? Um, but uh, but yeah, so in the cases where this gentleman could not get a BAA signed, that's the exact process that he had. He actually had an automation where he was taking large page reports and removing all identifiable information from them before there's just a part of an automation cycle, right? Where the input was a 5,000 page report. The output is a little bit less than that because all the names and diagnosis or information specifically associated to a person is gone. So yeah, and again, it becomes down to policy, maybe an organization says that that is going against it, but I would agree with Steve that if you anonymize, your risk is reduced. The data is out there, right? But you can't associate it to an individual or a company.
For sure.
We're 1 minute over. That was the last question. Steve, you have any final thoughts? Any words of wisdom? Any nuggets you want to drop before we let everybody?
Appreciate the op just appreciate the opportunity to share this with everybody. And I can't say this sincerely enough. Take a shot of that QR code. It'll make it very easy for you to reach out to me, and I'm happy to talk. Happy to hear about your challenges. Happy to hear about what's going on in the organization.
Hang on a
And
second. One more thing, Steve. I got a gentleman that just raised his hand. His name is Doug Dean. I actually started North Star together with him a number of years ago. I'm gonna let him talk. Maybe ask his question. This may be my biggest mistake that I make all week, by letting him talk. But I just wanted to give him a chance. Hey, Doug, are you there?
looks like he's there. There we go.
Doug, did you have something, or did you accidentally raise your hand? This is normally where Doug would be like, yeah, long-time listener, first-time caller. Steve, I hear you're like, you're a football fan. Like, who's your team now, Steve?
Well, I'm going
Are
to
you
answer
are you
that
a
without.
Vikings fan still,
I'm,
or
I'm
what?
going to answer that without waiting for Doug. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I
I am
know.
a
I'm just kidding.
die-hard Vikings fan.
I gave him permission that said allowed to talk, so I don't know. He's muted on his side, so I don't know. So Doug is hugely technical, right? And for some reason, now's our opportunity to ridicule him for not being able to get the audio working. But Doug, if you have any questions, just email me, shoot me, text me, or whatever. We'll talk. I am gonna let people go though. We're over the hour. Um, but if you guys thought that this was valuable, please let me know, and we'll do more of these. Again, I think that this is a really important topic, and I'm going to try to see if we could, do some more content around this with Steve, and maybe even plug him into some of our customers that are doing some of this advisory stuff. A big area, Steve, that we're focusing on is on the AI risk and readiness, right? So this kind of falls into that. I think you'd be an excellent resource to help collaborate on that. But I'm gonna let everybody go. Oh, wait a second. Oh no, never mind. But I already answered that word. Let everybody go. Thank you, Steve, again for all this great content. Thanks everybody
Thank
for
you.
attending. Please reach out, scan the codes, connect. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.